Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, live for you on LouTube today, and I've got a special guest with me today. Most of you should know who this is. This is Zach Smith, former assistant under Urban Meyer at Florida, at Ohio State. A couple other stops along the way, too. Zach Smith, appreciate you coming on today, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me on, man. I'm really excited to talk about all this COVID conference championship football.
The COVID championships, that's right. People, I want to know, whoever wins the national championship, they're going to have an asterisk next to their name. You know who won't care? Whoever wins the national championship. That's who won't care. Alabama has an asterisk next to half the titles they have now. I promise. Right. They don't care. I hear about it all the time. We got 17 titles. Really? Right. You were 9-3 and finished third in the SEC, but you were the national champion that year? Come on. Right. But they don't care. And no one will care if they're the coronavirus champion either. Right. But yeah, we got conference championship game coming up this weekend. So we're going to talk about those games today, preview them a little bit. Me and Zach will tell you who we think's going to win. Zach will tell you some stories along the way too. This will be a good show. Don't forget, Zach has a podcast too, Menace to Sports. Check him out wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple or whatever it is. Check his podcast out, Menace to Sports. How long you been doing that, Zach?
I've been about a little bit over a year and a half, almost 2 years in May.
Yeah. I've never done the podcast thing. I probably need to look in. People have asked me about it before, if I would take some of the shows and do them in podcast form or whatever. I just never really, I never really got into it. But you've been doing it for a while, so you're the expert there. Five conference championship games coming up this weekend, of course. ACC, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, Big 10. We'll run through them all, give you our thoughts on the games, who we think will win, that kind of thing. Talk a little bit about the playoffs. You ready to get started?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Georgia played Auburn twice, of course, in 2017. We play in the regular season towards the end of the year every year, and then they had the rematch in the SEC championship game, and the result in that game flipped. Auburn beat us pretty good in the regular season, and we returned the favor in the title game, and it really wasn't a close game the second time around either. Auburn had a few injuries and things like that, but that's the only time I can remember it happening with Georgia. Clemson and Notre Dame seemed pretty evenly matched when they played the first time. I know Clemson was down a few players, primarily Trevor Lawrence in that game, but that other quarterback still had, I mean, at 350 yards. I mean, I don't know how much more production you can expect to get out of Trevor Lawrence in this game than they got out of the other kid last go round. Now, maybe Trevor Lawrence brings like a calming influence from an experience perspective, or, you know, maybe he can, there's certain plays he excels at versus the other kid or whatever. And plus the leadership value of having him around. I think the defensive players they had out in that game, when I talked to Clemson fans, was more of a big deal in that game against Notre Dame than missing Trevor Lawrence. They were missing a couple of starters at linebacker. Before we started the show, we were talking about Brent Venables' kids, but they had to play in that game, right? Because they were down so many linebackers. All those guys are back now. Skalski, I think, is one of the linebackers' names, and of course, Trevor Lawrence on offense. I'm leaning towards picking Clemson in this game, but I do think it'll be a close game. I don't think Notre Dame is the same. Notre Dame has gotten blown out so many times in these big games. It's hard to just forget that's happened, you know, and people really love to hate Notre Dame. They love to hate Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a pretty good team this year. You know, they're not, this isn't 2012 Notre Dame where they showed up and got beat by 40 by Alabama, or even the team a couple of years ago that got blown out 31-3 or whatever it was by Clemson. I do think this is a pretty good Notre Dame team, and I think they have the ability to beat Clemson again. I'm leaning towards picking Clemson to win the game because the whole it's hard to beat somebody twice thing. Clemson gets all their players back, revenge factor. And Notre Dame, I mean, let's be honest, Notre Dame has not won a game like this since 1991. I mean, they were something like 0-6 in BCS bowls. They're now like 0-2 or 3 in playoff / New Year's Six bowls. And their average margin of defeat is like 25 points. So for whatever reason, they just crap to bed in these games. I'm leaning towards Clemson.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely scenario, right? And from what I saw in film with the kid DJ Uiagalelei, he played about as well as you can. I think there was maybe 2 throws the entire game that I said, you know what, Trevor might have made that throw. Like might have, not definitely would have, right? So I think that was pretty negligible. That kid, Trevor's backup is a good. I mean, he's a solid player.
Yeah.
He's going to be a great player next year. So I'm with you. I think the defensive guys that were out were the only thing that you could kind of put the blame on if you want to do that. But Notre Dame's interesting to me because they're like an old school Midwest football team. I mean, their offensive line is bar none the best in the country. They're ridiculous. I mean, in the run game, pass game, I mean, Ian Book has all day to throw. And so that's their strength. They have a kid, Kyran Williams, he's a smaller running back, has some explosion, but he's really a product of such a good offensive line. They got a solid tight end group. They're typical Notre Dame. They don't have flashy skill. Like if you walked into Georgia's receiver room or Alabama's receiver room or anywhere down south or even Ohio State's receiver room and compared it to Notre Dame's, you'd be like, ooh, this is like MAC football, right? Like this is not BC or college football playoff caliber skill on offense. So and Ian Book is an interesting case. I've been hard on him really for 2 years now, and he is just. This is going to be a steep comparison. I'm not saying he's to this caliber of player, but he reminds me of a Tim Tebow, where he's just kind of a baller. Like he extends plays, he makes things happen. Not a great thrower, not a great quarterback, but just kind of a baller.
Yeah.
And so if they can contain him and make him throw the ball to beat him, he's going to struggle. I mean, he all year long he struggled in passes over 10 yards downfield. He struggled under pressure. Like all the things I look at to indicate great quarterback play, he struggled.
Yeah.
But he kind of has that gamesmanship about him where he'll scramble for a first down. He'll get out of a pocket and find an open receiver in a scramble drill. So it's interesting. It's an interesting matchup, but I think Clemson at full strength, especially needing this win to get in the playoffs, right? That's the big thing. I think I'm with you. I think they roll. Now I'm going to pose a question to you, Uncle Lou. With everything going on, and I don't know how much it's talked about down south. I know Florida State had a weird cancellation with Clemson after they already landed in Tallahassee, but in the Big Ten, it's been rampant, right? Like teams are just pulling out of games without really providing any evidence that they even have COVID.
Right.
and so as I saw this, I think today or tomorrow it could happen. I don't see why Clemson and Notre Dame wouldn't pull out of this game. They would just have a COVID outbreak and say, no, well, we can't play it. Sorry, we're both in. Like, what
yeah, that's an interesting idea because I do think that maybe if Clemson loses, I think there's a possibility they don't get in.
Yeah.
If Notre Dame loses, they're in either way. So what's to stop Notre Dame from saying, we got a couple of COVID cases. We're going to have to ride this one out. We're going to have to skip this one. It would be interesting to see how that would get handled with the playoff committee and the media reaction and all those kinds of things. I mean, I don't think either one of us really think that's going to happen, but it's an interesting idea. Now, what if Clemson loses? I mean, this is kind of getting off the subject, but if Clemson loses, is there any way they get in?
I don't see how you can. Because, I mean, right now, if everything goes to, I'd say, plan, right, and Clemson wins, you figure Notre Dame and Clemson get in, right? Then Alabama's going to get in. And then the debate right now is going to be Ohio State didn't play a lot of games. A&M had a 3-point loss to Bama. Like, who should be in? I think if Clemson loses and they're a 2-loss team, that conversation about Ohio State and A&M is over. Ohio State is in, and now it's like, do you really put in a Clemson team that lost twice to a playoff team? That's basically telling you they're not a national champion team, right? They lost to a playoff caliber team twice. Or do you put in A&M, who lost early by 3 points to Alabama?
Well, I think they lost by 28.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. They beat Florida, I think, by 3.
By 3. There you go.
They lost to Alabama by 28. That's been the knock on them. Like, how do you lose to Bama by 28 but then beat Florida? That's strange. I don't think Clemson would get in if they lost. I really don't. They would have lost to the same team twice. So I think the debate then becomes, like you said, is it Texas A&M? Is it Ohio State? The whole who's the best 4 teams versus who deserves to be in. And I feel like we never really get a clear answer on that from the committee. Probably for a reason. Ohio State is one of the best 4 teams. I mean, I get it. They've played 5 games. I can watch a team play a couple of games and tell whether they're, pretty good. I mean, Ohio State's a really good team.
Right.
Clemson's a really good team. But if you get 2 losses to Notre Dame, you're out. But It's going to be hard to keep Ohio State out, I think. And what I don't understand what could happen this week. The playoff committee has had them in the top 4 since they were 2-0. So I don't know what could happen this week to make the playoff committee suddenly go, oh, you know what? They only played 6 games. They're not getting in. Like last week, they only played 5 games. They were 3rd. You know, they're going to beat Northwestern by 40 and you're going to drop them? I don't think so. So Ohio State is probably getting in no matter how mad that's going to make people. Right. They're probably getting in. And the thing about Texas A&M, they've had a good year. They're not a playoff caliber team. They're not. No. You can watch them play. They're not. They've struggled. They looked okay. They had a big win against Florida. They were sort of on a roll a little, and then they had to miss 2 weeks in a row because of the COVID. Yep. And they've just looked disjointed ever since they came back from that. They haven't looked as good as they looked earlier in the season. They would get absolutely mollywopped by anybody they played in round 1. I don't even think somebody like Notre Dame would beat them by 3 scores. I mean, I just don't even think it would be close. Never mind Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. So I hope they don't. I hope it's Ohio State because I think that'll give us the best matchup.
I think it will too. I mean, it's like you said. After probably 4 or 5 games, you could have said, "All right, these are the 4 teams. Let's just go. Let's just go play." The game threshold is. I mean, it's not even Ohio State's doing. That's my biggest issue. Like they've done such a great job in the program to curb COVID outbreaks. And I mean, out of the 3 games canceled, 2 of them were the other team in Maryland and Michigan. So this is really a gaffe and an error by Kevin Warren in the Big Ten and how they structured the entire season and their lack of, I guess, willingness to admit that they were wrong and postpone the season that long. I mean, this is unfortunate for Ohio State, but I get the outrage. Like if I'm an SEC country or I'm a A&M fan, I'm like, hey man, that's not my fault. That's not my fault that they screwed everything up on the front end. Like I get both sides of it, but like you said, Ohio State's one of the best 4 teams and they deserve to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
I've never really had a hard time at this point in the season going, okay, these are the 4 teams that should be in. And I am having a hard time with the Ohio State versus Texas A&M versus, well, not so much the Cincinnatis. I want to ask you about that in a second too. Yeah. But, you know, at some point, I do think, like, you need to risk it. Like, no one thought Ohio State would get blown out by Purdue.
Right.
But they did.
It happened.
And then and that cost them. Well, they're missing 5 Purdue games this year that they're not playing.
Yep.
You know, and so you never know what would have happened in those games. But I also don't see how you really, you know, they say all the time we're not going to punish a team necessarily for an injury. Like they say a team with 1 loss, a close loss, but their quarterback was out. We're not going to punish that team. Seems like you almost would have to take the same approach with COVID. Like you said, it's not Ohio State's fault that Michigan couldn't play this game. And do you hold that against Ohio State? I don't think you can. I think they're going to end up getting in. And you still live in that general area up there. What are people up there saying about Michigan? I have to know.
It's a train wreck. And I'll tell you what's even funnier than what Ohio State fans are saying is what Michigan fans are saying. I mean, this was like a blessing of all blessings. Yeah. I mean, 2 weeks before the game, message boards were lighting up like just begging, like, please let us have a COVID outbreak and not have to let Ryan Day hang 100 on us. Like that was their mentality. And Ohio State fans are just there. To be honest, there used to be such a level of respect for that game that you never wanted to see the opponent, right? Michigan, if you're an Ohio State person, you never wanted to see them in this state. Like you didn't want to see Jim Harbaugh failing this miserably, having a losing season, and this COVID outbreak that's going to basically take away their last 3 games. They just don't want to see it. They want to see a competitive team, but they obviously want Ohio State to beat Michigan by 30 every time they play. Yeah. But they want it to be competitive and relevant, back to like the 05 and 06, where it was number 1 versus number 2. Like that's what the rivalry. That's what everyone wants it to be. You know what I mean? So it's been funny, and what's even funnier is the Michigan administration is almost like backing Harbaugh. They're going to give him an extension. It's like their own fan base and even Ohio State fan bases think it's time for Harbaugh to go. Yeah. And Michigan's administration is just sitting there blindly like, yeah, well, let's sign this extension and give you a incentive-based contract.
Well, they left themselves an out, though. They extended him, but he accepted a lower buyout.
Right.
So to me, that means he better win next year.
He has to. He has to. I just don't. I guess I can't fully understand. Like, why does he need another year?
Right.
What is it?
I don't understand that either. He hasn't done anything, in my opinion, to earn. He started out as one of the most highest paid coaches in history. He hasn't done anything to prove that he now deserves more.
No, absolutely.
You know, if anything, he should be taking a pay cut, probably a performance-based pay. He'd be one of those, he'd be middle of the road somewhere. But Cincinnati, and then we'll talk about the Big Ten title game. Cincinnati is whatever 10-0, 11-0, whatever they are. They play Tulsa this weekend, maybe if the game gets played. Right. Now they were 11-1 last year, and their one loss. They played Ohio State and they lost 42-0. Yep. Now I know you can't say, well, last year's Cincinnati team is the same as this year's Cincinnati team. But they were a pretty good team last year, too. And 42-0 to an Ohio State team that didn't even get out of the first round of the playoffs. Will a group of 5 team ever get in as long as we have 4 teams? I don't think so.
That's what I was going to say. Not a 4-team playoff. Just the talent gap, the margin between even the best Cincinnati or like whoever you want to say, any Coastal Carolina, any of these teams, the talent gap between them and a middle of the road SEC or Big Ten team is so wide. Now, that's not to say they couldn't beat them once.
Right.
But for Cincinnati to go into playoffs and any fluke chance that they could beat 2 of the best 4 teams in the country, it would just never happen.
Yeah.
So
people are going to find this out too. If we do go to 8 teams down the road when the TV contracts change in 2023 or whatever, and they allow a group of 5 team in like a Cincinnati that has to then basically beat Alabama, for an example, would have to beat 3 in a row: Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma. There probably isn't a team. Alabama right now probably wouldn't beat the 2, 3, and 4 team 3 weeks in a row. Like, that is extremely hard to do 3 games in a row. Now, the first playoff game, like you mentioned, with a month to prepare, maybe you come up with something and you beat that first team, maybe with the 3 weeks to get ready for the game. But to play 3 games 3 weeks in a row, which is what it would be in an 8-team playoff, it would never happen. I can't imagine a Cincinnati, a UCF, even a Boise State from 10, 12 years ago running through 3 games like that. I don't think anybody thinks that'll ever happen.
No, and I always look back to my last game as a coach at Florida was the 2009 Florida team that lost to Bama in the SEC championship game. We went 12-0. We were loaded. I mean, stupid talent. And then we ended up playing a 13 or 14-0 Cincinnati team in the Sugar Bowl. And I mean, that was one of the most talented group of 5 teams I'd ever seen. I mean, they had Marty Gilliard. It was one of their big time receiver they had. He was a great college player. I mean, they were loaded everywhere. And I mean, we beat the absolute brakes off of them. It wasn't even, they didn't even belong on the field with us.
Right. Yeah. We're going to have to move on from any Florida. I could talk to you for 2 hours about the murderers y'all recruited down there at Florida in the late 2000s, but we better save that for maybe another show we can try to do down the road. But y'all did set a record for the most murderers ever on one team, so congratulations for that, I guess. Hey, I don't know. But
if you're gonna if you want a plaque on your wall, you got to find a stat to win, right?
Yeah, well, y'all found something. I don't know what y'all. Yeah, I don't understand how you had Captain Jesus and all those murderers on the same team, and they probably got along too. I guess I don't know, but that had to be like a weird I don't know, like Tim Tebow and Aaron Hernandez hanging out or whatever, eating lunch together. Like, I don't know, it just it seems weird, but.
It's definitely a topic for another show.
Yeah, let's move on because I'll get bogged down on that. We'll never get anywhere. Ohio State's about a 3-touchdown favorite over Northwestern. Now, I'm looking at this game sort of the same way, speaking of your Cincinnatis and your Central Floridas. When it gets to the second half of the season and those teams are trying to prove they belong somewhere, they will beat a team by 50 points if they can. We've seen it. Central Florida will go out and beat a team by 50. Cincinnati will do it. Somebody like Alabama, they can do that, but they'll take their starters out in the second half because they know all they got to do is win the game and they're going to get where they want to go. I'm sort of looking at this Ohio State game the same kind of way. Now, I think Ohio State's going to get in even if they win by 1 point. But they don't want to take any chances, I don't think. I think if they can beat Northwestern by 40, they will beat Northwestern by 40. I don't think they're letting off the gas in the second half. I don't think they're looking to rest anybody. I mean, they got 3 weeks before the playoffs would start. I think this game could get ugly. I respect Northwestern. I mean, Pat Fitzgerald, I think he played at Northwestern. Now he's been coaching there forever. He gets the most out of the talent he's got there, and every 3-4 years, it seems like they put together one of these years where they win 10-plus games or whatever, and they're a pretty good team. The talent gap is just unbelievable here, and the point to prove for Ohio State, I think, is going to be a huge difference maker in this game, and I think Ohio State jumps out on them early and doesn't let up, and I think this thing could get out of hand.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, it's reminiscent of 2014 to me when we went in and had to make a statement against Wisconsin, because we were going to be out of the playoffs and we had our third string quarterback, Cardale Jones, coming in. And it just feels very similar up here. Like everyone around here knows, like, you know what, they probably need to make a huge statement to kind of hush people down. Because like you said, I think they're in the playoffs either way, but a huge, a 40-point win would kind of put the icing on the cake and let everyone just calm down and let Ohio State in, you know? So I think Northwestern is such an interesting team, and they're not really dynamic or lethal. Like, you're not really worried about them, but Pat Fitzgerald does such a good job teaching fundamentals, and their defense is a soft defense, not physically soft, but just like they play with cushion, and they really make you methodically beat him. And for teams like Ohio State, like when we played them and I was there, you're used to an explosive offense, right? That's really frustrating to just have to methodically move down the field and score touchdowns. You want big plays, you want fireworks, you want 60-yard runs, 60-yard passes. And they just don't really let that happen often because they're so disciplined in what they do. So that's the challenge that Ohio State's going to have is, having 8 drives and scoring 7 of the 8. That's
right.
Good. And if they do that and methodically work down the field, then they'll win by 35 points. But
right.
If they don't, if they start to try to take shots, ill-advised shots, I know that we haven't heard who it is yet, but I think one of their 2 star receivers is going to be out with COVID for this game. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I completely agree with you. I think it's going to be a large margin of victory, but Northwestern's just that annoying team that you're just like, you can't do what you want to do, even though you're so much better than them, you know?
Yeah. 2 of the best teams, Alabama and Ohio State. It's interesting to me, Alabama's defense sort of struggled at the beginning of the year. There was the Ole Miss game where they gave up 600 or 700 yards or whatever, but pretty much since then, they've gotten consistently better every single week on the defensive side of the ball and are looking more like a complete team now. First couple of weeks at Ohio State, they couldn't run the ball unless it was Justin Fields to save their life. Now, they've looked a little bit better the last couple of games. And I really liked that Trey Sermon, the kid that came over from Oklahoma. I really liked him when he was at Oklahoma. He never really got a shot at Oklahoma because of some guys ahead of him and some injuries that he had. He didn't look that good early. Master Teague, I've never really been a huge fan of his in terms of being a superstar or whatever. But they've looked better the last couple of weeks. I think it was one or both of them had over 100 yards rushing a couple of weeks ago in the game against whoever it was they played. And, of course, Justin Fields, now he ran the ball something like 15 times week 1. And I remember the announcers all game going, this cannot be making Ryan Day happy. Like, if Ohio State's got to figure out a ground game that doesn't involve Justin Fields. Like, it's great if it's 3rd down and the pocket breaks down. It's great to know that Justin can scramble and run for a 1st down. But, like, he's your season. You can't have him running the ball 50. He's not Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow was a stump. You could run him up the middle 10 times a game. He was going to be fine. You can't do that with Justin Fields, No. And but their run game, sort of like Alabama's defense, has gotten better at the right time. It looks like that's what's happening with Ohio State's run game too, which could help them in a game like this against Northwestern. If what you're saying about having to drive down the field, because if that's the case, they're probably going to have some 3rd and 2s. Some 3rd and 3s, and it's good to know you got a guy or two that you can hand the ball off, and he's going to get you those 3 or 4 yards on 3rd down, keep the chains moving, keep your offense on the field. And I think that's what will happen. They'll get there some explosive plays. Northwestern may limit them due to that defense they play, but I don't think you can stop Ohio State altogether. I mean, they're going to get 1 or 2 here or there. Best case scenario for Northwestern, I just don't, maybe they keep it close for a little while. I can't imagine with everything on the line and the point that Ohio State has to prove. I really think Ohio State goes out and handles them.
I do too. And the run game, I think finally Trey Sermon is going to be the guy. I mean, it's been a criticism of mine all year that Master Teague is what he is. He's a short yardage back. He reminds me of, not to disrespect the bus, but Jerome Bettis almost. Like, he is a tough, hard-running 4-yard back. Like, if it's 3rd and 2, hand him the ball. Yeah. He's going to get the first down. And Trey Sermon just hasn't been utilized much in space, and that's where he flourishes. And we saw it in their last game. He kind of finally broke off a long run, made a guy miss, and you're like, ooh, he showed us a flash, like that. Like you said, I watched him in Oklahoma, and I was like, ooh, this kid has something there. And so it'll be interesting to see if they fully make that switch and give Trey Sermon the workload, and maybe that run game comes alive even more. But I think you and I are pretty much on the same page. This should be a pretty large victory for Ohio State.
And that game is played in Indianapolis.
Yeah, Indianapolis.
Every year. Yeah, the Colts Stadium, I guess. That's where they do the NFL Combine too, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. You ever been to the Combine?
One time.
Yeah.
One time. I could have went every year, and I guess you just don't realize how cool that is that you can go to it until you can't go to it.
Yeah.
But I went once when I had a couple guys there, and it's an interesting experience. It's like a big meat market of all these people that – these NFL coaches are funny, man. They all think they're the smartest dudes that ever lived. They know more than anyone that does not have an NFL logo. It's not really for me. It was never for me. I mean, after Michael Thomas got drafted in the 2nd round, I completely stopped respecting the NFL. I was like, if you guys, they come and talk to the coaches and they don't listen. And it's like, well, you guys know better, so go draft who you're going to draft.
Yeah. And now he's probably the best possession receiver in the NFL.
Right.
Michael Thomas. Yeah. Crazy. All right. Well, that's the Big Ten. We did the ACC. Pac-12 has been interesting. A similar case to the Big Ten in terms of a very limited schedule, multiple cancellations. They actually had a division winner that did back out of the game. We talked about what if with the Clemson Notre Dame, but of course Washington unable to play. Not a single offensive lineman available. Not one. Not even the walk-ons. So this had to be a situation where this thing spread around a meeting room. Because not a single offensive lineman for Washington available to play in the game. So it just becomes a safety issue at that point. I mean, I heard people say, well, you take the defensive lineman. They probably played both ways in high school. Yeah, it doesn't work that way in big-time college football. Like, the quarterback would get killed literally. It just doesn't work that way. So we end up getting the title game that we thought we would get heading into the season. That I think that most people thought, which is Southern Cal, undefeated, and about half the amount of, actually about 25% of the amount of respect that Ohio State gets. Now, they don't have a top 10 win like Ohio State does with the win over Indiana. And the eye test clearly tells you Ohio State is way better than Southern Cal. It's just interesting to me because Southern Cal's not Utah. I mean, Southern Cal's a household name. There's not 10 programs in the history of college football more recognizable than Southern Cal. Everybody right now can hear the fight song in their head. All I have to do is say it, and you say, oh, yeah, I can hear that. Everyone knows. So it is interesting to me, the discrepancy between where they're ranking Southern Cal versus where they're ranking Ohio State. I get it because I watch a lot of the games, and it's clear that Ohio State's way better, and they have an impressive win over Indiana, whereas Southern Cal, they got a 1-point win over Arizona State and a 3-point win over UCLA. So, or Southern Cal, So I get it. It's just interesting to me. There's two huge name teams, Southern Cal and Ohio State, same records, division champs, undefeated, COVID year. One has been in the top 4 all season long. One can't get into the top 10. And it sort of tells you where Southern Cal has been the last 10 years versus where Ohio State, because reputation gets you a long way. As long as we have human beings ranking people, reputation is going to get you a long way. And right now, Southern Cal's reputation nowhere near that of an Ohio State. I'm not a Clay Helton fan, really. But they play Oregon, and Oregon, what a disappointing team they are.
Oh.
Right? I mean, they're talented, loaded. I like Mario Cristobal. You know him, by the way?
I've met him a couple times in recruiting when he was at Bama and when he was the head coach at FIU. I really thought him going to Oregon was the perfect marriage. I mean, you're talking about a tough O-line coach taking over kind of the swaggy basketball on grass program. If you could merge the two, you could have a powerhouse, right? With the Nike money and everything else they have. And they've been a disappointment every year. I mean, it's been a shame. But I think what's crazy to me is going back to when the season's canceled and now USC's undefeated and not even being discussed. It's like people out west just don't really care.
No.
Like, when the Pac-12 canceled, you didn't hear anybody complain.
No.
And USC sitting outside the top 10 undefeated, and no one's bitching.
Yeah.
It's like, what, dude, is it really that far gone in out west? Like, football is just kind of like I don't even know what to call it. It's just like an enjoyable event if it happens. If not, we're going to go to the beach.
I know from doing what I do year round and just talking to people all over, the respect factor for the Pac-12 is in the toilet. I mean, the average college football fan just has no respect for even the best Pac-12 team every single year. And some of it is deserved. I mean, Oregon, when they had those great teams under Chip Kelly, they played an SEC team twice and got beat both times. Oregon made I think Oregon and Washington actually have made the playoffs. Both lost. Yep. They haven't won like a huge non-con game even in the regular season in a long time. People around here call the Pac-12 a softball conference.
Right.
A women's softball conference.
I mean, it really is like Arizona State softball is legit.
Yeah.
It reminds me so much. I spent 2 years at the University of Kentucky in undergrad, and it reminds me so much of Kentucky football back then, where people would go to games, people would watch them, people would cheer, and the minute Kentucky went down by 10, everybody left to go drink at the bar.
Yeah.
Like nobody cared anymore. They're like, oh, we suck. All right, see you later.
Southern Cal and Arizona State were the two favorites in the Pac-12 South. They played week 1. And the game came on East Coast noon.
Whew.
That's 9 a.m. That game was played out there. And I know it's a COVID year, but even if it wasn't, I mean, look at every Southern Cal game outside of that 5-year period under Pete Carroll. Second quarter, people are trickling in, they just got done eating their brunch or whatever somewhere. And they, let's go watch a little bit of the Southern Cal game. And they'll come in and they'll watch some of the second quarter. And okay, well, let's go out to eat. It's just, it's not on the top of their list of things to do out there. It's just not, the passion is not there for college football like it is in some other places. Now, they've got some monster football players that come from there. I mean, California's produced God knows how many elite players, and they've even had some good quarterbacks come off of bad teams and have some success in the NFL. I mean, some high draft picks from out there, but Oregon was disappointing. I mean, they won their first couple of games, but they looked really bad. They had like 5 turnovers against who was it? Washington State, I think, early in the year, and one late in the game. And I was like, what are they doing? Because I thought they were going to be really good. And then it finally caught up with them. They ended up losing a couple of games. They lost to Oregon State, and it was just like, man, this is hard to believe. But now we get them against Southern Cal. I still think Oregon's the most talented team in the Pac-12, more talented even than Southern Cal. Southern Cal's playing better, I think, but this is a hard game to pick to me.
Yeah, it is, and it was interesting. What was interesting, I don't have the lines in front of me, but I think USC was favored by like 7 or 8 against Washington, and when they announced the switch, it fell. They were favored by like 3.5 to Oregon. I was like, wait a minute. We just put the second best team in from that side of the conference, and their odds of winning went down.
Yeah.
Like, just bizarre. But
right.
I don't know how you pick it. I mean, not only is the sample size small, but this is just bad football.
Yeah.
It really is. I don't know how you pick the winner.
Yeah. I like watching Keaton Slovis, that quarterback for Southern Cal. I think he's got some potential, and you can throw a dart at Southern Cal's football team and hit 2 NFL wide receivers in any given year.
No doubt.
But they're just not, like you said, they're just not any fun to watch. And Oregon's usually one of the funnest teams in America to watch, and they're just a comedy of errors. I mean, they can't get out of their own way. Penalties, turnovers constantly. And, I'm sure a lot of that can be chalked up to a weird offseason or no offseason for a lot of these Pac-12 teams, and limited practice and COVID and yada, yada, yada. But the rest of the Pac-12 suffered under those same circumstances. It's not like Oregon was the only team that didn't get to a normal offseason. Like other teams sort of figured out how to play decent football, and Oregon has just stumbled all over themselves. I think I have to go with Southern Cal here. They haven't blown me away, and I'm not picking them because they're undefeated. They've played at a higher level consistently this year than Oregon has. I do think Oregon is a better team. They just haven't played that way all year. If there was even one game I could point to and go, if Oregon plays like that, they'll beat Southern. But there's not even one game where I've watched every Oregon game, all 4 of them or whatever it is. And there's not one game where I go, that's the Oregon I thought I would see. Like, they've looked bad in every game. I can't pick them to win.
No, you can't. It's funny. I literally watched both of their games.
Yeah. Because I pick a couple of teams every offseason, and I'm like, watch out for this team. I famously did it with Michigan a couple of years ago, and people will never let me hear the end of that, because it was one of the years where they got blown out by Ohio State and lost 2 other games they shouldn't have lost or whatever. And I was like, that's it. I'm never picking Michigan again. And I'm that way with Oregon now. Like, I was like, Oregon is legit. Like, they're blowing everybody away in recruiting. Mario Cristobal's the best coach in the Pac-12. They've got at least 2 first-round draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. They're legit. And then they just come out and look like hot doo-doo every single week. And I'm like, why every year? It's like Oklahoma State.
Yeah,
I said, watch out for Oklahoma State this year. When they come out, it's the same Oklahoma State team we've seen for 10 years in a row. Good enough to compete with anybody in America, but only shows up half the time. It's just so frustrating. And that's how Oregon was this year. So I'm going to stick to my word that I made a couple of weeks ago. I'm not picking Oregon. Give me Southern Cal in that one.
Yeah, I honestly, I agree with you, but I'm going to pick Oregon because it would be the most Pac-12 thing to happen.
Yeah.
Oregon's hasn't looked good all year. USC's undefeated. You know, I think the most Pac-12 thing to happen would be Oregon win by 14 points.
Yeah. I don't know. And of course, that game comes on Friday night, and you know why that is, right? If it came on Saturday, no one would watch it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
You know, there's only 3 time slots. So wherever they put that Pac-12 game on Saturday, no one's watching it. I think Ohio State plays at noon. The ACC plays at 4, and the SEC plays at 8. So wherever they put the Pac-12 in there, no one's watching it. I mean, it's just so they say, well, we'll play on Friday.
Right.
like JV plays the day before in high school, you know? That's the Pac-12 title game on Friday night.
Think about it, though. They are like studying from the MAC conference. Like, the MAC has action on Wednesday. Right? Like, the Pac-12 is going down that path. They used to have Pac-12 after dark. Like, you can watch an 11 p.m. clip if you want. Like, what is the brand of Pac-12 football right now?
Oh, man, what a disaster. Yeah.
What they need to do is to start buying houses for recruits again and load a team up and get like Jimmy Johnson out of retirement and bring him to USC.
Yeah.
And crank back up.
Yeah. That's the only way. It's just been so long since there's been a team in the Pac-12. Like, almost, you know, people are down on the ACC in general or down on the Big 12 in general or whatever. But still, every year, there's at least one team you can point to. I mean, it was Florida State for a while in the ACC. Now it's Clemson. You know, in the Big 12, Oklahoma makes the playoffs every single year. Like, you don't even have to worry about it. Now this year, not, but generally speaking. But the Pac-12, it's just like, okay, you know, the best team's going to go 9-3, 10-2, maybe 11-1. They're going to lose a big time. Look at Oregon. Oregon finds ways to lose to the SEC. It's unbelievable how they lost to Auburn last year to kick that week 1 game. Oregon whipped them for 59 minutes.
It was unbelievable. And
then Bo Nix closes his eyes, does a 360, throws the ball up in the air, a ball he shouldn't have thrown into double coverage. And, of course, the Auburn guy comes down with it and scores a touchdown basically as time expires to win the game. It's Oregon. Of course that happened. Right. It's just what a disaster.
The play that ruined Bo Nix's life, basically.
That was because that gave Auburn fans a false sense of what he was right there.
He was just he was the next big thing because of that one dumb decision and average throw that just happened to come down as a touchdown.
Yeah, that was bad. Kentucky fans keep asking about Joey Gatewood now because it came down to Bo Nix and Joey Gatewood heading into last season, and Auburn, of course, went with Bo Nix, and Joey Gatewood transferred out. And he played a little this year, and he didn't look good. But nobody looked good at Kentucky this year on offense. Their offense was abysmal. They brought – who did they bring? They hired a new offensive coordinator yesterday, and I'm drawing a blank now on who it is. But anyway, we'll see if they get it turned around next year. But who knows? It's Kentucky. You know what's alarming about Kentucky? They can't win a basketball game. Now, that's bad. There's something like 1 in 5 in men's basketball. I'm like, oh my God, those people are just going to give up on sports altogether. Like, they watch football just so they can wait on basketball,
Yeah,
and now they don't even have that. I'm like, oh my God. How weird is it? Kentucky's like 1-5. And then you got Mike Krzyzewski, the coach of Duke, giving interviews saying, I think we should cancel the season. Right. Like, what's going on here? Can you imagine Alabama and Clemson coming out in August and going, you know what? I don't think we need to play. I don't think we should play football. Like, what are you? Kentucky and Duke don't want to play? Like, what is going on here? This is weird.
It's a weird state of basketball. I mean, the day that Nick Saban came out and said something like that, it's like you would know that he had a terminal brain disease or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of weird, the 6th ranked Iowa State Cyclones are taking on Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. Zach, Iowa State is the 6th best team in America. Did you know that?
Oh, that's what they told me, I guess.
Oh, my God. Oh. What is happening here? Shout out to Matt Campbell, though.
Phenomenal coach.
How is I don't know why he's still there. I can't figure it out. He's got to be turning jobs down. I know there's people calling him. There's got to be.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got to be turning them down. I don't know how long that'll last.
Yeah, you got to be careful in a spot like that. Like, if you get hot and you win some games, you better jump at a good opportunity, because that's not something that you can sustain very long.
Yeah. And then you got Iowa State fans saying, oh, well, he gave an interview last week and said he just loves Ames, Iowa. Listen, Nick Saban loved the Miami Dolphins on Monday. On Tuesday, it was landing in Tuscaloosa. Like, this is just what of course he says he's staying there. They all say that until they're not there.
And have you ever been to Ames, Iowa?
No, that's sort of the point. No one has.
Let me tell you something. My grandfather coached there. My mom graduated high school from there. There's nobody that loves Ames, Iowa.
Yeah.
Nobody.
There's another guy that is on the channel a lot, and he lives somewhere in Iowa, and he's an on-field photographer. And so he goes to the Iowa games and the Iowa State games, and he even says, like, you don't want to be here. Like, there's nothing here. Somebody told me there's more pigs in the state of Iowa than there is people. And they said that's actually a true fact. Like, it's not just a funny joke. Like, it's a true fact, like a Census Bureau thing. There's actually more pigs in that state than there are people. I don't know. But I mean, Iowa State's had a good year. I can't get the Louisiana loss out of my head. And it wasn't a close game. But then they beat Oklahoma, but then they lose to, who was it? Kansas State or somebody, or Oklahoma State, I think it was. They lost to. So I don't know. They might be the best team in the Big 12. Oklahoma, on the other hand, people were so tired of watching Oklahoma get spanked in the first round of the playoffs. They were itching to write Oklahoma off. So when Oklahoma came out and looked bad and lost those 2 games early in the year, people just went, okay, thank God we don't have to deal with them anymore. Well, meanwhile, Oklahoma's gotten better every single week. People forget that Spencer Rattler was a freshman, a redshirt freshman, I think. So first year playing. He's not a Baker Mayfield situation, not a Kyler Murray, and not a Jalen Hurts. These were guys that transferred in. And so now Jalen Hurts had starting experience, not so much Kyler and Baker, but still they had been around the college game a long time. Spencer Rattler hadn't. Bumps in the road early on, turned the ball over early on in the season, cost them a couple of games. But they've been better the second half of the season than they were the first half. The problem is no one has paid attention.
Right.
I think Oklahoma's going to beat Iowa State. I know Iowa State beat them, and it was a good game. And Iowa State could beat them again. I think this will be a good game and a close game. But I think, I just think people were too fast to throw Oklahoma away because they wanted them to be bad. And I don't think, and their defense, I can't believe I'm saying this.
I was going to say, be careful.
Their defense is way better than what it was in 17 and 18. Now, they're nowhere near elite. I'm not trying to blow that kind of smoke, but this is the best defense they've had in a while, too. Now, when you're ranked 130th a couple of years in a row, 80th is great. I think this will be a good game, but I think I'm going to go with Oklahoma.
No, I'm right there with you. I think this team has gotten better and better. And like you said, people stopped watching because they were kind of, everyone was happy. It's like, finally, Oklahoma sucks.
Yeah.
Moving on. It's just, but Alex Grinch, the defensive coordinator who I worked with at Ohio State, he's one of the best coaches I've worked with as far as organization and attention to detail. And Ohio State fans hate to hear that because he was a part of the Greg Schiano nightmare defense at Ohio State. But, sometimes it's not your fault as the safeties coach that the defense sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's excellent. And he, like you said, he took over the absolute train wreck of defensive football in the country. And 2 years later, they're making strides. The biggest thing they could do is they can finally tackle.
Yeah.
I know it's unbelievable that that's something you have to learn how to do, but they were the worst tackling team in the country 2 years ago. So I agree with you 100%. I think Spencer Rattler is a typical first-year starter, young kid, 19 years old or whatever he is. And he's just gotten better and better and better. And they're doing things that suit him and protect him a little bit, not trying to open the offense like they did for Kyler for a 19-year-old. So I think Oklahoma wins. And I don't know what the spread is, but I think Oklahoma wins by a decent amount because they're so much more talented than Iowa State. And I think they're finally playing well.
Yeah. Texas.
Yeah.
What do you think the issue is? Forget the Tom Herman stuff for a second, because I mean, again, that's something we could do a whole hour on. Yeah. But it's not just Tom Herman. I mean, they had a guy before that. Mac Brown struggled towards the end when he was there. It's hard to figure out what's going on there. They have more money than God. They can build any facility they want, any building they want. They can, they can have whatever recruiting budget they want. And they've had some, top 5, top 10 recruiting classes in the last 5 or 6 years. But they are one of the most disappointing, not just teams this year, but one of the most disappointing programs, really, the last 10 years or so. And Sam Ehlinger was a senior this year. Every offseason for the last 3 years, they were winning the national title in the Big 12, and he was winning the Heisman and blah, blah, blah. And every single year, it's the same thing. And when I finally just gave up on him forever was the Oklahoma game this year. I said, okay, the guys beat Oklahoma once. That's it. This is his last year. He's a senior. Oklahoma's got this freshman that keeps turning the ball over. Like, this is the year. And Texas comes out and gets beat again, and then they lose more pointless games. I mean, they lost to Maryland 2 years in a row not long ago. They lost to Kansas like 4 years ago.
Right.
Like, that's hard. You know how hard that is to do? Like, you really have to try. Shout out to Les Miles, though, the grass eater. Man, golly, what is he doing out there? He won a national title, Zach. Hey, I heard Urban Meyer might be taking over. Urban Meyer might be taking over the. I don't know who else. Who's his bad? Oh, Urban Meyer to Tennessee. Yeah,
there you go.
Heard that too. Urban Meyer to the Hill. I don't know, but Texas is just a hot mess.
Texas reminds me so much in some ways of Tennessee and Phil Fulmer. It's like, they're not kicking ass and winning national championships, but they're really competitive year in, year out. And you get rid of them, and then you go down this rabbit hole of mistake hires and train wreck fundamental issues in your program. And now you're looking at Texas like they're probably the 4th best program in the Big 12.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
Yeah, and the Big 12 doesn't have 4 good programs, really. So to be 4th or 5th is not good in a 10-team league that is not good at all.
That's terrible. The 4th best program in the SEC, that's somewhat respectable, but the 4th best program in the Big 12?
Not good. Yeah, not good. An up and down thing. I mean, Kansas State, every once in a while, Kansas State will win 8 or 9 games. And then the next year, Oklahoma State wins 8 or 9. And then, Texas will win it. I mean, Texas made the Sugar Bowl a couple of years ago, but that was their peak. And now they're back down to losing to these teams that they just have no business losing to. And it's hard to understand. It really is. But, Oklahoma has just dominated that league for the last 10 years or so. But, I'm going to go with Oklahoma in that one. I hope it's a good game. I think it will. Clemson and Notre Dame, I think that has a chance to be a really good game. I think Oklahoma and Iowa State could be a really good game. I'm going to go with Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree.
And then I guess the last one, the SEC game, Florida and Bama. I don't know. Forget last week.
Yeah.
Okay. There weren't very many people giving Florida a chance on Friday last week, much less after they saw what happened to Florida against LSU. But it's hard. I mean, you can't just pretend that didn't happen. I mean, they didn't look good. LSU is not a good LSU didn't suddenly figure it out last week. Like, that's not what happened. I mean, they played a guy that's never played quarterback before. Mark Richt's nephew, by the way, that kid.
Oh, is he?
Is Mark Richt's nephew, Max Johnson, never played. He comes out, leads LSU to a win over a top 10 Florida team on the road in the swamp. Kyle Trask, 3 turnovers in that game, 2 interceptions and a fumble, throws his Heisman hopes away. And then the shoe.
The shoe.
I could not believe it. I could not believe it.
Yeah, it was surprising. It was a surprising thing. I've never seen that. 15 years of college football, I've never seen a kid take off someone's shoe and throw it 30 yards, as the ref so poignantly pointed out.
Right. That was the funniest part. That was the ref felt the need to let everybody know exactly how far the shoe was thrown. That was hilarious. Unsportsmanlike conduct on number of the defense, picking up the opponent's shoe and throwing it 20 yards downfield.
It was like if he only threw it 10 yards, we would not have this problem. But it went 20.
Oh, man.
He had to throw it that far.
If it's like you'll see sometimes like maybe it gets a little chippy on the field or something and somebody feels like a hit is a little late, so they stand up and there's like a retaliation thing or something, and it's always the second guy that gets called. And I hate that. I'm not making excuses for that. But you can watch something like that happen and go, well, I can, the guy got frustrated, the guy was pushed, the referee didn't see it, so you push him back, now you cost your team 15 yards. This guy didn't do anything. I mean, all this guy did was catch the ball and fall down short of the first down, basically handing Florida the game on a silver. He didn't do anything to you. And you picked his shoe up and threw it 20 yards. Like, you literally cost your team that game. Like, that is just, I can't believe it. And then you mentioned the clown, Dan Mullen. He comes out with a million excuses. Well, I rewatched the play, and it looked like as he was making the tackle, it was sort of in the act of the play that he ended up with the kid's shoe in his hand. And I'm like, what in the world? What kind of alternative fake news? What is this here? I don't understand. What? No, he picked the man's shoe up for no reason and threw it 20 yards downfield, Dan. That's what happened, you moron. And you got beat, and then crying. But, I guess the thing to do would have been not to play Texas A&M and LSU this year, because that's what seems to be working for other teams, or beat them, Dan. How about that? That's what I don't like about Dan Mullen. The guy can't take responsibility, in my opinion. No. Texas A&M game, they lose. He comes out in the post-game press conference and says, well, they had 40,000 students, or they had 40,000 fans there. Well, we had no chance. Huh? Next time you play them, there'll be 100,000 there. What do you mean 40,000? So you had to, that didn't look like 25% capacity to me. That looked like 40,000. I'm going to go home and tell my athletic director we need to have 100,000 people in the swamp, and this is how it's going to be. Then the next day he had coronavirus, and that's never funny. But irony is funny in general, though. And I'm just like, man, your clown level is 1 million, Dan. 12 years this guy's been a head coach in the SEC. 0 conference titles. He's Jim Harbaugh in disguise, this guy.
He is. You know what? I've known him a long time. I mean, when I came out of high school, I went to Bowling Green to walk on and play for Urban, and Dan was there. And I don't know how to explain him. Like, he is a really, really smart football coach. I like to think I'm pretty fair, especially with people I don't like, which Dan is one of them. He's a really smart football coach, but he is a guy that was a Division III tight end, just a terrible athlete. So, he has that chip on his shoulder, wasn't any good at football. Then he was a GA for like 10 years, like couldn't get a full-time job ever. So he has this like Napoleon complex about him where he's an excuse maker, he's petulant, he's whiny. And I saw everything I needed to see. You could see into the soul of a man in a moment of confrontation. We had a practice one time at Florida, and he just, the offense wasn't doing well, so that was his opportunity to yell at people that had nothing to do with it. Yell at walk-ons for being too close to his huddle. Yell at the strength coach for not keeping him back. Well, he challenged one of my best friends was an assistant strength coach. He yelled at him. He said, I don't know what your job is here, but move him back. This is in the middle of practice. Tim Tebow's in the huddle. Dan's in the huddle, about to call a play. Strength coach is a big Italian guy from Youngstown, the Youngstown area, and he just stopped where he was walking, walked right across the practice field in the middle of practice, right into the huddle, and grabbed him by the shirt and said, hey, you ever talk to me like that again? I'm going to knock your front teeth through the back of your throat. And I'm sitting here, Urban Meyer, his whistle in mouth. His smile was ear to ear grinning. He was loving it. And Dan his paper was shaking that he was trying to call the play on. He wouldn't look at the guy. And Tim Tebow and I talked about it for the next 5 years. You just saw everything about him. Like, he's that guy that yells and screams and kicks, but then when someone wants to punch him in the face, he's like running out the back door of the bar.
That doesn't surprise me one bit. He pulled a similar thing with Derek Mason, the coach of Vanderbilt, a couple of years ago. There was some kind of late hit or altercation or something right before halftime. And you ever known somebody that they get mad, but they don't get really mad until there's about 10 people between them and the person they're mad? That was what Dan Mullen did with Derek Mason. Like he was a little mad, but he was kind of just standing back. But as soon as there was like 10 players between, then he did the whole hold me back like that. And I'm thinking, Derek Mason would stomp a mud hole in you and walk you dry. Like, what are you doing? Like, come on, man. Just stop. Then he shows up in the post-game press conference a few weeks ago wearing a Darth Vader costume. And I'm like, yeah, Dan, people really look at you as like the bad guy. Like, yeah, like that. I mean, this guy, what a try-hard, this Dan Mullen. Oh, what a joke. Dak Prescott, an average quarterback, and he's living off of that. Well,
living off of it.
He tries to take credit for Tim Tebow, too.
Oh yeah, Tim Tebow and Alex Smith. Those were his two, claims to fame.
Right.
And what people don't know is Tim Tebow chose Florida over Alabama because it just goes back to your Jesus comment, because he disliked Dan Mullen so much and who he was as a person. He prayed and felt like God was sending him at that point in time to help change Dan Mullen into a good man. That's why he went to Florida. Can you imagine that?
Man, this is gold. This is gold, Zach. This is good. This is great. Okay, so Dan Mullen, who's a Florida man, by the way, versus Nick Saban in the SEC title game. Alabama was there was a line out on this game actually last week, and I think it was like about 13 and a half, 14, somewhere in there. I was surprised yesterday it was only up to 17. Alabama has a 17-point favorite. I don't think this game will be close. In this chess match, I'll take Nick Saban over Dan Mullen, his defensive mind versus Mullen's offensive mind. And we talked about this earlier. Alabama's defense is not the defense that played Ole Miss 2 months ago. It's not. It's gotten significantly better every single week, and they're playing at an extremely high level right now. And they're the definition of a complete team. They could run the ball 50 times and beat you, or they could throw the ball 50 times and beat you. You just decide how you want to lose. You want to put 8 people in the box? Fine. Devontae Smith's going to have 200 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns. The guy's unbelievable, by the way.
I mean, unbelievable.
At Devontae Smith. And then Najee Harris, can he run over you, around you, jump over you? He's got all the video game moves. A true complete team. Florida can't run the ball to save their life. The average college football fan can't name 2 players on Florida's defense. There is no superstar on Florida's defense at all. None. No. Plus, they have Todd Grantham, and that handicaps them big time. I think Alabama will win the game. I stood up for Florida a month ago when it was pretty clear they were going to be the representative from the East, and people were saying, oh, Florida's got no chance. I said, no, Florida's got a chance. You can score like that, you got a chance. Look at Ole Miss. But Alabama's defense has gotten so much better. And Florida hasn't played a game. Florida's best game they played was against Georgia. Since then, it's been downhill. They struggled in the first half against Missouri. They struggled in the first half against Vandy. They lost to LSU. Kyle Pitts is not 100%. That's an issue. He'll still get his, I'm sure. But I just don't see a way where Florida can stop Alabama for one. I mean, Alabama might score 50 points. And I know Florida's got a good offense. Florida might score 30. And that's good against Alabama. But it ain't enough to beat them with that defense. It's not. There's no way. I don't see any way Florida wins the game.
I don't see any way Florida keeps it close, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been trying to like this Florida team all year. I mean, I'm a Florida grad. I'm an alumnus, right? As much as I don't like Dan Mullen, I enjoyed my 5 years there. So I would love to like Florida. But I just don't see it. They can't run the ball. They don't have outside receiver presence. They have 2 guys on offense, Pitts and Kadarius Toney. Those are their 2 kind of playmakers, right? And I always thought Kyle Trask was kind of an overstated, overhyped quarterback. He's a really good quarterback. He's not a Heisman type of quarterback. And his defense has been suspect all year long. And you said it best. I mean, if they don't have a great run defense, Najee Harris is going to run the ball for 300 yards on them. And if they don't have a great pass defense, Devontae Smith, Mechie, all these guys are going to go for 500 yards passing, and they have neither.
Yeah.
So it's like, not only can they not limit one of Bama's two threats, they really can't limit either of them.
Yeah. There's been some years where Florida had elite secondaries. I mean, they like to claim DBU. Them and LSU fans will argue all the time. Even if this was one of those years where Florida had an A++ secondary, it's still a struggle to stop the Alabama passing game. Even if you have an elite secondary, and they don't. Their secondary is good, really good, but it's not great. It's not as good as some of the secondaries they've had in the past. No. And they don't have that one guy up front like they had, like Grenard, I think was his name for the last couple of years, a defensive end or tackle or something. If you had to have a play on third down or you needed somebody to blow up a run in the backfield or whatever, he would do it. It was kind of like Chase Young. He wasn't as good as Chase Young, but Chase Young had a knack for making his biggest plays at the biggest moments. That was the most amazing thing about Chase Young to me. Not that he got a bunch of sacks in the first quarter against Illinois, but if you needed a big play at a moment in a game, he made it time after time. It was unbelievable to watch him. But Grenard was sort of that way with Florida. You know, if it was 3rd and 2, he was going to make that tackle in the backfield. He was going to stop that guy. You know, if you needed a sack on 3rd and 8, he could get it. They don't have that guy. They don't have it. They don't have that guy up front. They don't have the guy. They can't take away either side of the field. Neither of their corners are, you know, lockdown guys that, don't throw towards that guy. They're good. They're good. Obviously they're good. They're playing big time college football, but they're not at the level of a Patrick Surtain at Alabama or a Derek Stingley at LSU. And they've had players like that more times than not in the recent past, but they don't have that right now. I think Alabama, it's a guessing game. Alabama can run or throw. Florida can't run at all. I mean, they can't. They just can't. They hardly even tried against LSU.
Right.
A bad matchup here. I think Florida goes down.
And it'll be karma at its finest, right?
Yeah.
Dan Mullen complaining about playing less games. Like, sorry, Dan, you could have played 4 regular season games. You were still going to catch this butt whooping from Alabama at the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I watch Alabama play, and it's just they're almost. I think they're by themselves right now. I think they're better than Ohio State. I think they're better than Clemson. I think they're better than Notre Dame. They just seem to be. I mean, they can score at will. It's scary to watch Alabama play right now. I don't see how in the hell were we beating them 24-17 at halftime with Stetson friggin' Bennett. How did that happen?
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, if you'd have just had JT Daniels in the game, who knows? I still can't believe that. No, I don't know. It's strange. Bama's been the most complete team I've seen on film maybe in 2 years. I mean, they're just absolutely loaded. And Ole Miss, you know, Lane Kiffin knew what he was doing. They went no huddle, ran a million plays, gassed the defense. I mean, that you could have that philosophy going into the game against Nick Saban. And I mean, we did it a little bit in 2014, but that's tough to sustain. So they've minimally had minimal times of struggle this year. And the Georgia game, that first half was kind of 1. Ole Miss is obviously 2, but every other team I watch, I could tell you 3 things that I think might bite them in the ass in the end. I can't find 3. I can't find 1 or 2 for Bama. Yeah. Unless Mac Jones comes out and, you know, even Nick Saban, as great as he is, he says it all the time, can't turn the ball over, can't turn the ball over. Yeah. I mean, you come out and give a team like Florida 4 extra possessions or something, then everything's off. You know, anything could happen then. But there's no reason to think that's going to happen in this game. I just think Alabama's too good. It looks like a loss for Florida. That'll 3 losses. They only dropped 1 spot. It's unbelievable. Now, I spend way too much time in my life defending like the playoff committee and ESPN against the whole SEC bias thing. It's hard to understand. It's hard to understand how a 1-loss Florida team can lose to a 3-win LSU team at home and only drop 1 spot. And that same committee dropped Cincinnati 1 spot, and Cincinnati didn't even play. It's hard to justify that. It's moments like that for a guy like you where you're like, you know, face and palm, like, come on. I'm trying to fight for you here.
Right.
You're not helping me.
Yeah, you're setting up the other guy here. I mean, this is an easy knockdown for the other guy here. The only thing I can figure is if somehow Florida were to beat Bama, they must be planning on putting Florida in.
Right.
So they're telling themselves, well, we can't move Florida down to 9 because then what do we do if they beat Bama? Because they're going to put the SEC winner in, even with 2 losses. So I guess that's what they're thinking. I don't know. And then they got to be saying, well, and then if Florida loses, we can always bump them down next week. Maybe they were thinking, I don't know, but it looks bad. No, it looks bad that they only dropped to 1 spot. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah. The playoff committee has always been about setting the stage for what they want to happen. And obviously the games control it mostly. But you even go back to look, like when the initial rankings came out, the 1-loss Clemson team was over Ohio State. And you didn't know that Ohio State was going to have all these cancellations at that time. It's like, how could you put a 1-loss team ahead of an undefeated team? And similarly, why did Cincinnati fall? Because they don't want Cincinnati to win by 50. Some other crazy stuff happens. And Cincinnati was at 6, and they feel like they got to put them in, right?
Yeah. We better bump them down a little.
Yeah, bump them down just in case. You know what I mean?
Oh, God. Yeah. And this is a weird weekend, too, because normally all we have is this 5 games this weekend, usually. But, of course, there's games all over the place this weekend now with makeups from earlier in the season. Yeah. Not Georgia. They got canceled. Vandy canceled. Georgia's trying to find somebody to make it up, but I don't know how much success they'll have with that. But so you got a whole bunch of games. But, of course, the championship games are the ones everybody will be watching. Now, if you had to put $1 on the national title winner right now, I'm assuming from what you said it would be Alabama. But
yeah, if we're not talking odds, I mean, you won't get much of a payoff putting $1 on Alabama.
Right.
Yeah, I think Alabama wins it all. I don't know how anyone can beat them, including the other 3-4 teams that probably will be in the playoffs. I don't see it.
Somebody called in last night and said that they read an article that had potential spreads and that Ohio State was the closest to Bama.
I could see that. I mean, the Ohio State has the firepower to score. I mean, they have the throw game. The run game's been okay, but this secondary at Ohio State is not ready. Like last year's secondary with 2 first-round corners and a starting NFL safety probably wasn't ready for this Bama team on the perimeter. And so I know this year's secondary is not ready for it.
Yeah. And apparently, I mean, according to Nick Saban and everyone else, Jalen Waddle is their best wide receiver.
Oh,
and he's been out for 6 weeks.
There's no doubt.
He hasn't played.
Yeah, he was their best player. From what I saw in film, he was their best player.
And they're doing what they're doing now without him. And there's word that he may play in the playoffs. Now, that would be unbelievable to me. Because that injury was brutal looking.
Yeah, it was.
But I have heard from Alabama fans that there's a possibility he could play in the playoffs. I almost hope he doesn't. That just seems way too soon. I don't know. But whatever.
Well, that seems really dumb for the kid. I don't know if I'd risk that. He need to be a first-round receiver this spring.
Yeah. Their offense is unbelievable. And I mean, must give defensive coordinators nightmares to try to figure out how to stop that. You were a wide receivers coach, right?
Yep.
Now, why did you is that what you played like in high school? And I think you said you walked on at Bowling Green too. So why a wide receivers coach?
Well, it's probably one of my biggest regrets. I didn't really think it through. Just the prima donnas that I was going to have to coach my whole career.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I played receiver and DB and quarterback in high school. I walked on and played receiver kind of by default. I mean, I wasn't a great player. I probably wasn't ever going to play at the college level. I was good enough, I guess, to kind of get recruited. But then the receiver coach at Bowling Green was a guy named Billy Gonzalez, who's at Florida now, who played for my grandfather. And obviously Urban was a receiver guy. So I was just kind of instructed through my grandfather and really from Urban that, listen, you're going to go this route and I'll teach you everything I know. And this will be the best chance for you to have a good career.
Yeah. That's how it all started. Yeah. And so Bowling Green, now where else? Urban was at Utah?
Yeah, he went to, so after I went to Bowling Green his second year as the head coach, and then he left and went to Utah. And he was there for 2 years. And then when he got to Florida, I still had a year of undergrad left. So I transferred to Florida to just kind of start interning, volunteering, whatever you want to call it, in the football program down there.
Yeah. And then you went, how long was he? He was out 1 year between Florida and Ohio State?
Yeah, 1 year. 1 year.
Okay. And you started with him at Ohio State right away?
Yeah, 2012. So I left Florida before his last year, before the whole foundation crumbled, really.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were there to the end.
No,
okay.
I took my first really full-time job at Marshall with Doc Holliday. And got out right before everything crumbled. And then I took a job with Steve Adazio, who was a Florida offensive coordinator at Temple in 2011. And then when Urban got the job at Ohio State in 2012, he hired me.
Okay. I don't know. I missed all that. I didn't know that. I thought you went straight from Florida. I don't know why I thought that, but I guess just because of your connection to Urban, I don't know. I guess maybe I just assumed that. I don't know. But I never knew you were at Marshall. Was there anybody at Marshall or Temple that we would know? Player-wise?
Well, so at Marshall, we had a guy named Vinny Curry, who's still in the NFL starter. He's been on the Eagles forever. He's not really a household name, but he's a really solid player. I had a kid that was an early second rounder, Aaron Dobson, who went to the Patriots and kind of had some injuries, didn't really pan out. Other than that, Temple, we had a couple guys that are Tahir Whitehead has had a great career, but not really a household name. So we had guys, but nobody really, superstar.
Yeah. And I could talk to you for another 10 hours, but just one more, and then we'll wrap it up, because this is a preview show. I don't want to take advantage of you here, but who's the one player? Maybe it was a wide receiver that you coached. Maybe it was somebody on another team. I don't know. But who's the one player in your coaching career that 5 seconds after watching him do anything, you went, that guy is the best player I've ever seen?
Percy Harvin, by far.
Yeah.
Percy Harvin was a true freshman. And I think we played Central Florida the first game, and he had a catch and he had a gear that I have to this day never seen. I mean, he hit it, and everyone on the sideline was like, holy, like, what was that? I mean, it was just like, and then what he did in the Oklahoma game, the national championship game, I mean, he just took the game over. I mean, he didn't do anything else on offense, just hand him the ball.
He did everything. He returned kicks. He was a receiver, jet sweeps, toss sweep. I mean, you name it, he did it on offense.
And what's crazy is he obviously had his share of, just whatever you want to call it, growing issues or mental issues, whatever you want to call it. But when he went to the Seahawks, Pete Carroll, I'm sitting in a staff meeting at Ohio State, and Urban Meyer's phone rings, and he looks at it, he goes, Pete Carroll? Like, this is in the middle of the season. Like, he didn't, and this is the year that the Seahawks won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And he called him, and he called him specifically to talk to Urban about, like, how do you handle this guy? Like, how do you manage him? And he made a comment that I've always thought about, because this guy coached Reggie Bush, right?
Right.
One of the most prolific offensive players ever. And he told Urban, he said, I'll tell you what, like, this is tough because he's so good that we're going to manage his personality as best we can, because that's how good he is. He said, he told Urban, he said, I really think this kid might be the best player to ever strap up a helmet, ever. You just don't really know it because he had so much other stuff going on.
Yeah. He was fun to watch. I mean, as a Georgia fan,
right.
I hated him that one game a year, but there's a handful of players in college football every year that I don't care. I'm a college football fan. Georgia's my favorite team. I don't try to hide that, but I love college football. So, Georgia fans hate it when I say Tim Tebow, to me, is one of the greatest top 10 college football players of all time, just because of what he did. Jerry Jeudy. I could watch Jerry Jeudy catch slant routes 20 hours a day. It just doesn't get old to me. I don't understand how people usually, even if it's a little bit, will slow down, even if it's just a little bit, when they get ready to catch the ball. Jerry Jeudy speeds up through you just have to, you've seen it, you have to see it. It's just that it's unbelievable. And I love watching great football players, regardless of what team they play for. I mean, it's the best sport on earth.
It really is. That's what I loved about recruiting. Like, I'll never forget that one of the coolest things I ever saw was I was trying to recruit Calvin Ridley, which obviously was a complete waste of time. He was going to Bama from the jump. But he came up to camp and he was going to work out for me. And he brought just finished his freshman year, Jerry Jeudy with him. And I'm sitting here, I don't know anything about this kid, Jerry Jeudy. He didn't really play as a freshman. You know, I don't know anything about him. We get in camp, and he looks better than Calvin Ridley, probably the number one receiver in the country. And I'm like, who is this kid? And now you just watch everything that unfolded. It's so cool, this recruiting process, and a story like that. Like this random kid from South Florida walks into our building, puts on a show, and here we are, whatever, 5 years later, he's first rounder, just killing it in the NFL.
What's the youngest kid that you ever seriously there's been 8th graders who have received scholarship offers. I mean, growth spurts. I don't know how you figure this out when they're in 8th grade, but anyway, so Jerry Jeudy was in 9th grade. You're talking, and you knew then. You're like, okay, this kid's definitely going to be something. I mean, have you ever looked at an 8th grader and gone, that's who I need in 5 years? That guy, that kid. It seems strange to me.
You know what? I think people that do that are they're fishing for publicity. And, you know, I've never in my life, I mean, you go to there's some schools you recruit, like St. Thomas Aquinas in South Florida, where they'll have 8th graders with offers. They'll tell you about them. Like, you may write their name down, but I'm not seriously offering that kid till he actually plays football. You know what I mean? Yeah. And either that, or I need to be his position coach and I need to have him in camp and work with him. And then I could tell you, maybe he is special, you know, not an 8th grader, but like Jerry Jeudy. Like, I'd have never offered that kid if I didn't have my hands on him in camp, and he was a freak show. Yeah. So, like, then I still needed to work with him, though, just because you have to verify that stuff. I mean, those kids could, you know, you look at a kid that's a 15-year-old that runs a 4.6, you're like, that kid's probably going to be 4.4 by the time he's a senior. Yeah. But what if he's not? You know, like, what if he doesn't get faster?
One thing that we hear a lot down here, you know, in high school you have 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A. How much harder is it for a 1A or a 2A kid versus a 4A or a 5A? And as a coach or a recruiter, how do you judge, okay, how good is this 2A kid or this private school kid? Yeah. Is camps the only way to really judge that, or?
Partly. I mean, partly, that's a big part of it. I got to the point toward the last probably 3 or 4 years where if I didn't work with a kid or at least watch him a full practice, not even games, practice, I wasn't going to recruit him, because, you know, with nowadays down south, everyone has spring football. Most kids will come to camp for a day when they're a sophomore or junior. And the success rate of those kids that you actually have hands on and you watch live is so much higher than a highlight tape. But, you know, you watch some of those films of those kids at smaller schools, you understand the competition isn't what it is at a 5A, 6A school. But ultimately, like, how a kid changes direction, you know, how he bends, how he explodes when he runs. I mean, some things, it doesn't matter who else is on the field.
Right. Yeah. You can just watch it and tell.
Yeah. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott played the worst football I've ever seen in my life, but you cut on the film, you were like, whoa, like, that kid is special.
Yeah. I forgot about him. He was something.
Oh,
yeah.
Something else.
Yeah. He's still doing it now in the NFL. He's another one too that needs to be. He's got some issues, I think. At least in the NFL, he does.
Yeah, he's a wild dude.
Yeah, moved down to the Bahamas or something when he was holding out or whatever, and was training down. He's like, I'm training. I promise, I'm training. I'm in the Bahamas. I'm training.
You can't be mad at him, right? Like, sounds like a hell of a deal to me.
Yeah, yeah. Recruiting is wild, though. How does it? So if you're the wide receiver coach and you're then recruiting, are you just recruiting wide receivers too? Then?
That's kind of been the trend lately, and that's where we headed as a staff. But Urban was so big on the relationship aspect for some guys, right? Like, I'd say half of our staff just recruited their position. And then you had guys like Greg Schiano, who was so deeply rooted in New Jersey that he was the New Jersey guy.
Okay.
And then I recruited 757 in South Florida for, 5 years or whatever. I built some ridiculous ties down there that Urban was never going to let me get out of that. Like, you talk about Pat Surtain, Tyson Campbell. Obviously, we didn't get those kids, but those are kids that I was the lead recruiter on because of my relationships at American Heritage, my relationships at those two at American Heritage. So it just depends. Mostly now, yeah, it's pretty much all national position recruiting.
Yeah. And so you got a bunch of assistant coaches on a staff that are sort of doing their whatever their specialty is, whether it's a region, a geography, or a position group or whatever. And then how does that work? Do they bring that to the head coach and they say, we need these 3 wide receivers? And then the head coach goes, well, we can only We only got room for 2 this year. Like, is there back and forth between like the wide receiver coach and the offensive line guy where the wide receiver coach is going, you got to give up one of your offensive linemen because I need this third wide receiver. Like, how much of that back and forth sort of goes on?
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the head coach's decision. I mean, it's a pretty detailed personnel board where you have a certain number. Receivers for us was always 14, where that was kind of your scholarship number, anywhere from 12 to 14, depending on the head coach and depending on your style of offense. And that's where you had to manage. You had to kind of manage your position group a lot like a head coach manages a team. Like, I have 12 guys. I got 2 guys graduating. This kid's going to transfer. I'm going to have 3 slots. And then you go recruit to those 3 slots. That it sounds clean and sounds easy, but then it gets a little political. It gets a little dicey. You know, you get the head coach to fall in love with your 4th receiver, and the O-line coach is bringing in a kid that's a 3-star, maybe not a great player. The head coach is going to look and say, that kid's not that great, and this 4th receiver is an ass kicker. Like, and then you could kind of sway, get an extra kid here or there, but that's just the kind of the politics of how you play the game.
What's the reason behind coaches being so secretive about the number of players they can sign in a year? Is it a competitive advantage over other? They don't want another school to know?
Yeah, I think it's mostly just they don't want other schools to say, look, they can only take 24 kids this year. They're already at 22. And these 2 kids are probably going to commit. You're out. Like, you're not going there. Like that. There's also ways to get around it, right? There's ways like gray shirts, counting guys back. There's ways to maybe add a guy here or there. And these conferences have put in rules now that you can't oversign by too many numbers. So they don't want that others. They also don't want other schools to be able to say, no. They have 27 kids signing and only 25 spots. Like, that means they're getting rid of some kids or something. You know, whatever. That's Saban's big deal, right? Kick 8 people off the team and sign 28 guys.
Trying to talk about recruiting and sound educated. Like, I get now why there are entire industries devoted to nothing but recruiting. Like, it's so like I did a couple hour thing this morning, just sort of following along on signing day, you know, and I'm looking at the recruiting rankings, and, you know, this team has 21 commits, and somebody will say, well, how many more can they sign? Well, I don't know. On average, they can sign about 25, but if they signed 23 2 years ago, maybe they can sign 27 this year, or if they've got some juniors leaving, maybe they can. It's so, and of course the coaches, I mean, they don't tell you anything anymore about recruiting or anything else, and it makes it impossible to figure out. But I do love watching these commitment videos. I mean, these kids have got to be. Some of them are creative now, and some of them may be a little over the top. But I can't imagine like being in that situation, like the feelings and the thoughts that kid must have when he's getting ready to sign that thing. And I mean, just probably been playing football since he was 6 years old, you know. And God, I mean, it's got to be unbelievable. You know, parents crying. And for a lot of these kids, that, you know, they're first in their entire family to ever go to college. So there's the educational part, which we forget about a lot as football fans, that, you know, most of these people are never going to play in the NFL, but a lot of them are going to leave with an accounting degree or business degree or whatever degree. And in a lot of cases, that one degree turns around an entire family, you know, generations, in some cases, of parents who maybe didn't even graduate high school, or whatever. And that one kid, because he excelled at football or whatever, was able to get into that college and get that degree. And that can be like a turning point, you know, 10 generations prior to that versus what happened after that. I mean, it's a huge deal for these kids, and we forget about that sometimes on signing day, but we're fans. We just, how fast can he run? You know, how can he jump? Is he going to fumble? How many touchdowns is he going to throw? We focus on that kind of stuff. But it's a big deal for these kids and their families today. So shout out to everybody who's signing today, and good luck to everybody too. But Zach, this was amazing.
This is awesome, man.
This was great. Yeah. I love talking to you. I could probably stay on all day, but then my kids would be stuck at school if I did that, and they'd be big mad. I can't. And Mrs. Lou would be mad too. I left the kids at school. So we're going to have to cut it short. So just to recap, though, you've got Oklahoma.
Yep.
Bama. Clemson?
I'm taking Clemson. Yeah,
taking Clemson. You took Oregon.
Clemson.
You took Oregon in the Pac-12, and you took
I'm taking Oregon.
Oklahoma in the Big 12. I think the only one we disagreed on was the Pac-12. I took Southern Cal.
Right, and the only reason we disagreed is because I have no idea.
and I have a moral obligation to no longer pick Oregon because I've embarrassed myself for the last 6 months on this channel, pumping them up just so they can come out and crap to bed. So can't pick
how
them
fitting
anymore.
would it be for them to win this game then?
Yeah. I can maybe hit a few people with the "I told you so" routine. I told you Oregon was winning the Pac-12. Meanwhile, they backed into the title game because another team is ate up with coronavirus. But hey, I'll take whatever I can get.
Any way you can get it, right?
Yeah. All right, Zach, man, I sure do appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and I hope we're able to come up with some ideas or some ways for us to make this at least somewhat of a regular thing. This was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right, you guys make sure you check out Zach's podcast if you haven't already. Menace to Sports. And check it out. It's on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts at. You'll find it. Check them out. Zach Smith Podcast, Menace to Sports. We appreciate y'all watching. Any last words, Zach?
No, man. I'm just glad to be on, man. Trying to do this YouTube thing and try to be like you. So I appreciate you having me on, and that was really awesome.
Yeah. Well, you'll get there, and I don't know why you would want to be like me. You need to set your goals a little higher, sir. But anyway, I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a lot of fun, and we'll have to do it again.
Definitely, I appreciate it.
All right, buddy.